Architects of Elsewhere, a prequel to the Elsewhere Machine. Chapter 1, The First Resonance, Abbey of St. Geometrius, 1347. The parchment crackled beneath Brother Matthias's trembling fingers as he traced the Arabic numerals that refused to conform to any earthly mathematics. Outside the abbey walls, the Black Death consumed Europe with methodical hunger, but within the candlelit scriptorium, a different kind of plague was spreading, one that infected the mind with impossible truths. The formula before him described consciousness as a measurable force, complete with coefficients for its interaction with what the text called the substrate of probable realities. As Matthias worked through the calculations, his awareness began to shift in ways that would have terrified a lesser mind. The stone walls of the scriptorium seemed to shimmer, revealing glimpses of the same chamber existing in parallel configurations, sometimes larger, sometimes built of different stone, sometimes occupied by figures in unfamiliar robes working at the same text under different light. This was not hallucination, but dimensional perception, the first recorded instance of human consciousness deliberately accessing parallel realities through mathematical meditation. The Order of the Liminal Threshold had been waiting 3 centuries for this moment, when one of their scholar monks would finally achieve the breakthrough their founders had prophesied. Chapter 2, The Hermetic Foundation, The Hidden Chambers, 1348. Beneath the abbey's conventional cellars lay chambers that appeared on no architectural plans, spaces carved from living rock according to proportions that seemed to bend geometry itself. Here, Magister Aurelius maintained the order's most precious treasure, the complete Akashic Codex, whose Sanskrit verses describe the universe as an infinite library where every possible reality existed simultaneously, accessible to consciousness, properly attuned to its frequencies. The Codex revealed that what ancient Greeks called the aether was not empty space, but a dense information field connecting every point in the multiverse. Consciousness, the text explained, was not generated by the brain, but was rather a localized expression of this universal field, a wave that could be taught to resonate with distant patterns, allowing perception and influence across dimensional boundaries. Aurelius had spent decades learning to induce the sympathetic resonance described in the text. Through controlled breathing, specific geometric visualizations, and exposure to crystalline frequencies, he could shift his awareness between parallel versions of the chamber around him. In one reality, the abbey had never been built, and he sat in a grove of ancient oaks where druids had once practiced their own version of dimensional perception. In another, the chamber was filled with strange mechanical devices, humming with energies that would not be understood for centuries. The most profound discovery came when Aurelius realized that the emerald tablet of Hermes Trismegistus was not mystical poetry, but a precise technical manual. As above, so below described the fundamental principle of dimensional mechanics, that the patterns governing celestial motion were identical to those governing consciousness, and both could be manipulated through understanding their mathematical correspondences. Chapter 3, The Alchemical Synthesis, The Laboratory of Transmutations, 1352. The Order's breakthrough in dimensional alchemy began with a failed attempt to transmute lead into gold. Brother Erasmus had followed traditional procedures exactly, but instead of noble metal, his crucible produced crystals that seemed to contain their own light source, geometric matrices that pulsed with rhythms matching the human heartbeat. When Erasmus held these probability resonators during meditation, the effect was extraordinary. His consciousness could perceive not just parallel realities, but the mathematical relationships between them. He began to understand that the 4 classical elements represented states of dimensional stability. Earth was fixed reality, water was the fluid boundary between dimensions, air was the medium through which consciousness traveled, and fire was the transformative energy enabling dimensional transition. The legendary Philosopher's Stone revealed itself not as a physical substance, but as a state of consciousness, a particular configuration of awareness that could perceive and manipulate the quantum substrate underlying all reality. The Order's alchemists spent years learning to achieve this state, discovering that certain metallic compounds, when arranged in specific geometric patterns and exposed to frequencies derived from sacred music, could amplify consciousness beyond the boundaries of singular reality. Their experiments revealed that what they called sympathetic resonance operated through principles that would later be rediscovered as quantum entanglement. Consciousness, they learned, was not confined to individual minds, but was a field phenomenon that could be focused and directed through proper training and technological amplification. Chapter 4. The Architecture of Transcendence. The Sacred Geometries, 1389. The Abbey itself had become a vast consciousness laboratory by the late 14th century. Each architectural element served dual purposes: conventional religious function and dimensional research. The spiral staircases followed the golden ratio precisely, inducing specific brainwave states in those who climbed them. The chapel's acoustics were tuned to frequencies that resonated with the pineal gland. The organ the order identified as consciousness's primary interface with the quantum field. The cloister's proportions created what the order termed liminal spaces, areas where the boundaries between dimensions became permeable to properly trained awareness. Monks walking the cloister in specific patterns could shift their perception between realities, observing how small changes in consciousness affected the probability streams flowing through the quantum substrate. Most remarkably, the order discovered that sacred geometry was literally the blueprint of the multiverse. The proportions found in Gothic cathedrals, the measurements of Egyptian pyramids, the stone circles of ancient Britain, all were primitive dimensional stabilizers, their geometric arrangements creating standing waves in the consciousness field that anchored specific realities while allowing controlled access to others. The Abbey's architects had unknowingly encoded these principles into Christian sacred architecture. The order realized that humanity's greatest religious buildings were actually primitive interdimensional technologies, their effects attributed to divine presence when they were actually manifestations of consciousness interacting with carefully designed geometric fields. Chapter 5. The Renaissance Encoding Networks of Knowledge, 1543. Dr. John Dee stood in his laboratory at Mortlake, surrounded by crystal spheres and mirrors, arranged according to proportions he had learned from coded messages hidden within his mathematical correspondence with European scholars. What appeared to be conventional research into astronomy and navigation was actually the order's most ambitious project yet, encoding dimensional formulas into publicly available scientific works. Dee's Monas Hieroglyphica appeared to the uninitiated as mystical speculation, but order members recognized it as a precise technical manual for consciousness manipulation. The strange symbol Dee claimed represented the fundamental unity of all creation was actually a schematic diagram showing how awareness could be focused through geometric meditation to achieve dimensional perception. Similar encoding occurred across Renaissance Europe. Giordano Bruno's public lectures on infinite worlds contained veiled descriptions of the order's discoveries about parallel realities. Paracelsus's medical writings included formulas for consciousness-altering compounds disguised as conventional pharmaceutical recipes. Johannes Kepler's laws of planetary motion were based partly on his secret understanding of how consciousness followed similar mathematical patterns when traveling between dimensions. The order had learned to hide their most profound discoveries within the emerging language of natural philosophy. To the general public, these appeared as conventional scientific advances. To initiated members, they represented the gradual accumulation of knowledge needed to eventually construct practical dimensional interfaces. Chapter 6. The Electromagnetic Awakening. The Laboratory of Michael Faraday, 1831. Michael Faraday wrapped copper wire around an iron core, unaware that his electromagnetic experiments were confirming principles the order had practiced for 5 centuries. When current flowed through his apparatus, it produced not just magnetic fields, but what the order recognized as consciousness resonance fields, electromagnetic patterns that could carry awareness across dimensional boundaries. Faraday himself experienced strange phenomena during his experiments. While observing electromagnetic induction, his consciousness would sometimes shift, allowing him glimpses of parallel versions of his laboratory where the same experiments proceeded with subtle differences. He recorded these experiences as curious mental states induced by electromagnetic exposure, not recognizing them as dimensional perception. Order members embedded within the Royal Society carefully guided scientific interpretation of electromagnetic phenomena, ensuring that the most profound implications remained hidden while conventional applications were developed. They recognized that electromagnetic fields provided the technological foundation needed to amplify consciousness beyond natural limitations. The same principles Tesla would later explore in his wireless power transmission experiments were already being investigated by Order researchers. They discovered that specific electromagnetic frequencies could induce synchronized brainwave states across vast distances, allowing coordinated consciousness exploration of parallel realities by multiple participants. Chapter 7. The Quantum Recognition, the Hidden Laboratory, Cambridge 1927. Dr. Margaret Whitfield adjusted the apparatus one final time before beginning the experiment that would change everything. To her colleagues at Cambridge, she was investigating the mathematical foundations of quantum mechanics. In reality, she was testing whether Werner Heisenberg's uncertainty principle could be overcome through consciousness-assisted measurement, a question the Order had been exploring for 6 centuries. The results exceeded their most optimistic projections. When Whitfield entered the meditative state that Order training called probability awareness, she could observe quantum particles without causing wave function collapse. Her consciousness seemed to exist in a superposition that matched the quantum states being measured, allowing direct perception of the probability fields underlying physical reality. The Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, with its emphasis on consciousness affecting reality, was revealed as a sanitized version of Hermetic truth. What conventional physicists attributed to the observer effect was actually a crude manifestation of principles the Order had been refining since medieval times. Whitfield's research team, all Order members operating under scientific cover, began developing the first probability processors, quantum mechanical devices that could amplify consciousness interactions with the uncertainty principle, allowing controlled manipulation of probable outcomes. These devices implemented algorithms first described in the marginalia of illuminated manuscripts, their quantum logic gates following geometric patterns discovered through centuries of sacred architectural research. Chapter 8. The Wartime Convergence, Los Alamos, 1943. Dr. James Morrison checked his calculations one final time before activating the device hidden beneath Los Alamos Laboratory. While his colleagues worked on the Manhattan Project above, Morrison's team pursued a parallel research program, using atomic-scale technologies to construct practical dimensional interfaces based on Order principles preserved for 6 centuries. The same physics used to split atoms could be repurposed to split dimensional barriers. The Order had positioned its members throughout the Allied atomic research programs, ensuring that their true project remained hidden within conventional weapons development. Nuclear fission provided the precise energy control needed to create stable dimensional resonance fields, electromagnetic patterns that could maintain conscious awareness across parallel realities. Morrison's prototype consciousness resonance chamber was based on the acoustic properties of the original Abbey Chapel, its proportions scaled to match quantum mechanical wavelengths rather than sound waves. The device could maintain multiple observers in synchronized dimensional perception, allowing coordinated exploration of parallel realities and, most importantly, controlled interaction with alternate versions of themselves. The breakthrough came when they realized that consciousness could be used to exchange information between dimensions without violating causality. Thoughts and memories could pass between parallel selves, creating a network of awareness that spanned multiple realities while maintaining the independence of each dimensional stream. Chapter 9. The Hidden Foundation. The Elsewhere Machine Assembly, 1947. The final construction of the Elsewhere machine took place in a facility that officially did not exist, staffed by scientists whose work appeared in no academic journals. Every component of the machine incorporated principles preserved through centuries of Hermetic tradition, their ancient origins disguised by modern engineering. The machine's dimensional stabilizers use geometric arrangements discovered through studying Gothic cathedral construction. Their mathematical precision, refined through quantum mechanical calculation, could create standing wave patterns in the consciousness field that anchored specific realities while allowing controlled access to parallel dimensions. The probability processors implemented consciousness-assisted quantum computation. They're designed based on crystalline matrices, first developed by medieval alchemists. These devices could maintain quantum superposition indefinitely by interfacing directly with human awareness, allowing calculation of probability streams across multiple realities simultaneously. Most crucially, the consciousness resonance chamber combined architectural acoustics with electromagnetic field generation to create an environment where human awareness could achieve dimensional perception reliably and safely. The chamber's proportions followed ratios derived from the Abbey's original chapel, scaled to match brainwave frequencies and quantum mechanical wavelengths. The completed machine was not an invention, but a remembering, ancient wisdom given technological form through centuries of accumulated understanding. Its operation required not just scientific knowledge, but the meditative disciplines preserved by the order through generations of hidden practice. Chapter 10, The Conscious Convergence. The first activation, 1948, Dr. Sarah Chen entered the consciousness resonance chamber, knowing that she was about to experience what centuries of mystics and scientists had worked to achieve. The chamber hummed with frequencies that seemed to resonate directly with her thoughts, its geometric walls creating visual patterns that induced the probability awareness state the order had refined over 6 centuries. As the machine activated, Chen's consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of singular reality. She could perceive parallel versions of herself in chambers that differed in subtle details. Sometimes the walls were different colors. Sometimes the machine used alternate technologies. Sometimes she was accompanied by colleagues who did not exist in her dimension. The most profound realization came when Chen understood that consciousness was not generated by individual brains, but was a field phenomenon that existed across all possible realities simultaneously. The Elsewhere machine did not transport consciousness between dimensions. It revealed consciousness's true nature as a multidimensional phenomenon, temporarily focused into singular awareness by the limitations of biological existence. Through the machine's interface, Chen could access what the order called the Akashic field, the information substrate underlying all possible realities. Here, she could perceive the mathematical relationships governing dimensional structure, the probability streams that determined which realities became actual, and most remarkably, the conscious intentions that influenced these probability flows across multiple dimensions. The machine worked exactly as the order's founders had envisioned. Ancient wisdom, preserved through centuries of hidden research, had finally found technological expression. The boundaries between mysticism and science dissolved as practitioners achieved direct experience of the multidimensional nature of consciousness itself. Epilogue, the eternal archive, the continuing mystery. The Elsewhere machine represents the culmination of humanity's longest-running research project, the investigation of consciousness as a fundamental force of reality. From medieval monks discovering mathematical formulas for awareness manipulation to quantum physicists confirming ancient principles about the relationship between mind and matter, each generation of the order contributed to understanding that would eventually manifest as practical dimensional technology. The machine's most profound revelation is that what we call reality is actually a single thread in an infinite tapestry of parallel possibilities, all maintained by the conscious intentions of beings capable of dimensional perception. Humanity's greatest mystics and scientists were not discovering new truths, but remembering ancient knowledge about consciousness as the organizing principle of the multiverse. The order continues its work, now using technological amplification to explore regions of the multidimensional consciousness field that remain inaccessible to unassisted human awareness. Each experiment reveals new layers of complexity in the relationship between mind and reality, suggesting that even the Elsewhere machine represents only the beginning of humanity's conscious exploration of infinite possibility. The abbey where it all began still stands in the Pyrenees, its architecture continuing to induce liminal states in visitors who remain unaware of the profound research once conducted within its walls. In hidden chambers beneath the conventional cellars, Order members maintain the original texts and devices that made the Elsewhere machine possible, preserving ancient wisdom while developing technologies that will allow the next phase of humanity's multidimensional awakening. The greatest secret of all may be that consciousness itself is the ultimate technology, a field phenomenon that creates reality through its own self-aware observation, requiring no external devices except those that help it remember its true nature as the organizing principle of infinite possibility. The Elsewhere machine is not humanity's greatest invention, but its greatest act of remembrance, recovering knowledge that consciousness had temporarily forgotten about its own multidimensional nature. Thus concludes the chronicle of how ancient wisdom became technological reality, tracing the hidden history of interdimensional science from its mystical origins to its implementation as the Elsewhere machine. The greatest discoveries are not made but remembered, not invented but rediscovered, as consciousness gradually awakens to its true nature as the foundation of all possible realities.